Hello, folks. So the video you just landed on is a second day of a money shift workshop where I am talking all about how you can shift your relationship with money. This video is all about how you can shift your relationship with debt, learning how to shift not only your mindset, but some of the most important first strategic action steps you can take in transforming your relationship with debt and credit, and the very different perspective I take than the current financial industry on debt and credit, and how you can really start to use it to become a tool for your financial empowerment. So if you are excited about it, go ahead and give this video a like, leave me a comment with kind of what really resonated with you and landed well with you. If you really like and enjoy this content, make sure to subscribe. It definitely helps out my channel and the algorithm, and I will see you in the video. Bye. I'm so excited that you are joining me for day 2 of the Money Shift workshop series. If you're hopping on live or catching the replay, definitely drop a comment below, say hello. I love seeing, getting to know my community, getting to know my audience, getting to know you and seeing where you're coming in from. If you missed day 1, definitely go check out the day 1, which is all about the very first steps that you can take into creating a money shift in your relationship, both strategically and from a mindset perspective. We definitely talk about what are the ways we can drop into ease, pleasure, and fun with actually starting to manage our money, either from the business side of the house or personal side of the house. So it's super important if you're wanting to take those first steps and you're wanting it to be a different experience. I encourage you to go ahead and check out day 1. So for those of you joining me for day 2, I'm super excited to be talking about the topic of debt today. So debt is something that, whether you be a business owner or not, I think that our relationship with debt and credit is something that can be deeply impactful to our money relationship and the feelings we feel around financial empowerment. And so I really want to talk about how can we drop into empowerment around our debt? How can we learn how to reframe our debt? How can we learn how to feel empowered around credit and really be empowered money managers around those aspects from both a business side and a personal side? I think that so many of us, right, kind of face this scarcity mindset and face, fears around building a financially stable future. And we see debt and we see credit and we see it as this very negative thing, because I'm going to talk about, right, how the current industry paints debt and credit and how that actually perpetuates a very disempowered narrative, and how there's actually really smart ways to utilize debt and credit to help you grow your wealth and allow expansion to happen, right? And actually enjoy your spending, right? Because that's a huge thing, right? Like, how can we develop an enjoyment of our spending? And a lot of times I think when we see aspects of debt, it's a lot of guilt and shame around how we chose to spend our money. So let's talk about where the current industry is at, how I'm different, and what are the strategies and mindset shifts that you can make to shift this aspect of your money relationship, right? We're really focusing in on debt today. I think it's a super important aspect that so many people want to veer away from, or they just dive into kind of the industry standard relationship with debt. So let's dive in. Empowered money manager. Love that. Seeing that in the comments. So fabulous that lands with you. I'm so excited. Yes, I do believe that each individual is an empowered money manager, and it's just about uncovering that empowerment. I think we all have the capacity and ability to be empowered money managers, and it's the exact mindset and strategies that I teach with the feminine finance methodology. So let's hop right in. Where is the current industry at when it comes to debt? Well, it's not looking good. I'm going to be honest, okay? Because when you look at the current financial industry, right, you see that when it comes to talking about debt or credit or utilizing credit cards, even, in any way, in any capacity, it's always painted as a negative. It is painted as something that, a lot of times you feel shame around if you carry debt, if you have debt, if you are in debt. Let me know in the comments if you resonate with this, from college loans to credit cards to investing in programs or traveling, personal loans, whatever it may be. These things are always painted as something that you should feel shame around that you have, even though a majority, actually more than a majority of the population, is living with debt or utilizing credit. And so a huge aspect here is, that creates a lot of problems, is then people shrink away from utilizing debt or credit in strategic manners, right? We are discouraged from being empowered money managers and learning how to utilize debt, learning how to utilize credit. And let me know if this has been your experience in the comments, right? Like, were you ever educated around, strategic use of debt or strategic use around credit? And instead, what ends up happening, because debt and credit are vilified, you kind of really push them away. You're like, I'd rather just work with cash. I'd rather buy everything full cash out. That's the dream, right? Being able to buy a house, like all cash, buying a car, all cash, right? Like not having to work with credit at all and having it be perceived as this really negative thing. Or potentially you went through the experience of developing a high level of debt from credit cards or from a lack of information and education around financial management. And so after that, you kind of made a vow of like, okay, I'm closing all these credit cards. I'm never using these again. I'm not getting into this position again. I think that is so common for folks who have come to work with me. And I want you to know that if that has been your experience, you're really not alone. This is so common and normal because there's such a lack of empowered money management education around credit and debt. And that is why they make up such a big part of my curriculum when I teach financial management, because it's really, really important for us to understand how to utilize this tool. That's how I perceive debt and credit, right? This is a tool for you to utilize, for you to build up your credit score, for you to build up, how you're perceived by lenders when you maybe want to purchase a car or when you want to purchase a home, right? It's how do we strategically build these aspects? And so many of the women who come to work with me, a big aspect is shifting their credit score. And like time and time again, I get the pleasure of helping them develop their financial plans to then, see that 50-point bump or, 30-point bump or, 150-point, like moving multiple categories up because we strategically approached their financial plan, right? And there is a strategy to that. So let me know if this is something that has definitely impacted your feelings around like creating a financially stable future, if it has impacted a scarcity mindset for you of really dropping in and being like, it never feels like there's enough. And I always feel like I need to turn towards debt or credit. And that feels so unsustainable and really doesn't feel expansive, right? So instead, it's about rewriting that dynamic with debt and learning how to see it as an expansive tool that allows you to get to the next level of your own financial abundance. So where the current industry is at, as I was saying, right, like is one where is a lot of shaming on if you have debt, if you have, college loans, if you haven't been able to pay your college loans, if you have credit debt, if you have a personal loan, right? There's all this like negativity of like, oh, well, you should have known better. And like, if you have it, then like you've made your bed and now you need to lie in it and like figure this out on your own. And I want you to know that that's not true, right? Is that like, you don't need to figure this out on your own. You can seek counsel, you can seek community and learn the strategies on sustainable debt repayment, which leads me to the next point that I want to talk about where the current industry is at, is when it comes to debt and credit. So you get vilified for having it. So then the strategies that are promoted in eliminating debt, right, and building your credit back up is to either one, right, get rid of all the credit cards and then like buy everything cash out, which long term is not the best strategy because it limits your ability to grow your financial wealth. Or it is to then just not use like choose repayment plans that are very unsustainable, right? And you find yourself falling off, or you find yourself going into such a high level of burnout because you have eliminated everything from your spending that brings you any ounce of, ease, pleasure, joy, fun, and it creates like a very activated nervous system, kind of kicking you into scarcity mode, kicking you into survival mode, right? And then you see not like your income not being able to grow. You see challenges bubbling up in your business. You see, stress bubbling up in your relationships. You see kind of those pressures coming in your relationships with your friends or family or loved ones. And it creates some really challenging dynamics. So let me know in the comments, right? Like if you have bought into some of those unsustainable practices and they didn't work for you, but instead of being like, oh, wow, this strategy doesn't work for me, you kind of turned on yourself and were a little bit like, oh, I'm just not good with money. And really what I need to do is figure out how to pay off these credit cards or eliminate this debt and then like never take out debt again. And so you then have gotten really upset with yourself potentially with how you've invested your money of, was it really worth it to have that experience, to go on that trip, to, go see your family or loved ones when they needed you, or to invest in that program, invest in that coach, even if it maybe was helpful or transformative for you, it's hard to justify now that you haven't been able to pay it off if it was a good investment, right? And so I think that there becomes a lot of stickiness in what we choose to spend our money on, and if we choose to do it via credit or debt. And so this is where I'm going to pivot into how I'm different. And also we're going to start talking about some of the mindset shifts that we can make around debt and then the strategies we want to take. So the way that in which I am different than the current financial industry and how I teach money management is, number one, I want you to be an empowered money manager. I want you to know that you can handle debt, that you can handle credit cards, that you can utilize this as a tool to expand and grow your financial wealth, right? I want to know from you in the comments, how does that feel to you? Like thinking like, oh, wow, there's an empowered way for me to utilize debt. There's an empowered way for me to utilize, credit and actually have it, support you and your dreams, right? And create a greater financially stable future. Because I think this is a perfect example of this is that there was a article recently where people were freaking out because of like one of the Kardashians decided to like get a mortgage for a house. And they were like, oh my gosh, like, can you believe this, like, billionaire or like millionaire, I can't remember which one it was, like that they were buying a house on credit, right? That they were buying this mansion. And the whole thing is that there is this very interesting shift that happens where it's like, oh, actually, right? When the wealthy do this type of action of buying on debt, they don't perceive it as debt, right? They perceive it as leverage, right? They're leveraging their money in a different way so that she could redistribute her funds in a different place that would allow it to grow faster, right? So what I'm trying to say here, right, is that like you could either dump all your funds into a property, right? All the cash into a property. One of the Kardashians, they could dump all their money into a property. And the thing is that they could actually have the numbers be run, and them paying the interest on that mortgage could be less than the money they could earn investing those funds into whatever X portfolios their financial advisors are letting them know about, or different ways the funds could be invested that would give them a greater return than what that interest may be, right? So I'm going to check in with the comments for a moment, but I want to invite you into understanding, right? Like how, going back to day one, right? How interesting language is here, that it gets perceived as leverage when it becomes an uber wealthy person, right? Or a super wealthy person. Yet for, the everyday person, it is perceived as debt and it is negative rather than a strategy that is being utilized. So obviously you may realize some of the hinting I'm doing here into saying what one of the very first reframes that I'm going to provide to you around debt is really seeing debt and credit as a tool for you to be able to achieve a higher level of financial stability and success and legacy that you want. So I'm going to check in with comments, and then I want to talk about the other aspects in which I'm different. Oh gosh, yes, I have experienced this kind of debt cycle and feeling the wheels just spin. Exactly. It feels amazing to be in the driver's seat and feel the confidence from being the money manager. Absolutely. I absolutely love that, Heather. And I'm so celebrating that, because I think that we can feel so out of control when we have high levels of debt, or even not even high levels of debt, right? It can really make us feel out of control because of the narrative that the current financial industry drives. So I really want to invite you away from that. And I want to invite you into this understanding and perception of, oh, actually, like I get to be the empowered money manager. I get to reclaim my autonomy. I get to reclaim, my agency in my relationship with debt and credit. And that is a huge aspect of how I teach engaging with debt and credit. So number one, I do not perceive, if you haven't figured out yet, I do not perceive debt and credit as a negative. I am credit neutral, right? I am neutral around debt, around credit. Yes, we can be emotionally responsive to our debt and credit. And I think that there are tons of opportunities for us to develop a healthy, empowered relationship with our debt and credit. And so that's always the goal, so that we can navigate having debt or not having debt, carrying a balance or not carrying a balance, and have it be a pretty similar experience, and really seeing, debt and credit as an opportunity to, use as a tool to grow our financial wealth. And so I do this in the feminine finance methodology through, number one, unconditional love and compassion. This is a huge pillar of the feminine finance methodology. And it's actually leaning into the mindset strategy that I'm going to talk about right now. So the mindset strategy I want to talk about around debt is really asking yourself to lean into thinking through the debt that you have and examining it, and asking yourself, how do you feel towards each type of debt, right? And this can be a really interesting exercise, because a lot of times when people think about their debt, they just lump it all together, right? And then it's just a negative cloud, like rain cloud, and it doesn't feel good, which I totally get. And let me know in the comments how debt feels to you, right? Or maybe if you're like, how debt used to feel to you if you're not new to this community, but really think through, okay, like how does this debt feel? And start to separate out your debt, even if it is on the same loan or on the same, credit card or things like that. I want to invite you into actually doing the mindset work to be like, oh, I have different types of debt. You may have a personal loan. You may have a loan from a family member. You may have, a mortgage. You may have a car loan. You may have credit card debt, right? And when you start to separate them out and you start to see that you have different responses or emotional responses to each of these types of debt, you start to see like, oh, wait a minute. Is there space for me to drop into gratitude here? Is there space for me to drop into unconditional love and compassion for myself around the financial choices that I made that led me to take on this debt, right? Because you may feel actually really good about your home. You may be really happy that you have this beautiful place, that you are building your wealth, right? That you are paying a mortgage every month, and this home is becoming yours, and maybe you've built a family there, right? And it's something that brings you a lot of joy and pleasure, right? And so why should that be something that you should feel ashamed about, right? Or maybe, you look at your college loans and that feels really triggering for you, because it just seems like it's this big weight on your shoulders. And so you think like, oh, but when I think back to college and the people that I met and the connections I made and the experiences I had and the traveling I did and the courses that I took, it was an amazing, fantastic experience. And some of those skills you're maybe utilizing today, and it feels so good. And so it's like, is that really something that we need to feel shame around? Or is it just a space to be invited into a reframe of gratitude for that debt, gratitude for yourself, for giving you, that future line of credit, whether that be from a credit card, or college loans or whatever it might be. But it's like you chose to, at the time, even if you didn't have all the information, which was definitely an experience for me, you were like, oh, like, this is what I want to do. And you decided to kind of give yourself that credit, right? That line of credit. And it's now just about finding the sustainable way to repay it. So I want to invite you into that reframe around this. The reason why I bring this up, and the reason why this can be so transformative, not only for your personal finances, but your business finances as well, is a lot of times we invest in our business without having the funds first, right? And this was a very impactful exercise for one of my clients who had built, a multiple six-figure business, and, kind of money felt like a dirty little secret to her. And she had a lot of credit card debt that, felt very activating for her. And she was like, it's just upsetting because of the feelings of being a high earner and then having this high level of debt and not figuring out how to pay it off sustainably. And, feeling like what needed to happen, the only solution was to, book a number of clients in full, have them pay her in full for the high ticket packages she was selling. And then she'd be able to just pay off the credit card debt in large lump sums. Okay. That is not necessarily a sustainable plan. And that had been her plan for some time. And yet the debt had not changed or shifted, right? And so when we did this exercise of starting to separate things out, the other big aspect that was happening here was she had utilized personal credit cards for business spending and business investing. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't have a problem with that. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying though, so in her mind though, what was happening was, oh, I need my personal money to pay off these personal credit cards, even though they were investments in my business. And so I can't now see them as business spends or business expenses that I need to take care of. So when we actually started talking about this and we started assessing the different debt and where it came from, and then looking at the financial picture of her business at multiple six figures, having multiple six figures booked out in revenue, having an incredible run rate of the money that was planning to come in, it was kind of like the very obvious thing was, oh, we don't need to wait for some gigantic, white knight, pay in full to take care of this debt. What we need to say yes to is, a loan that you can apply for through your business at a fixed rate to pay these off in full, get you on, a 3-year potentially repayment plan for this at a much lower interest rate, and actually switch in your mind that these credit cards were business credit cards, even though they were in your personal name and you utilized them to, invest in your business. That's okay. But we need to reframe into understanding what type of debt this is, right? So not only do I want to invite you into, when you do this exercise of this mindset work of like, oh, how do you feel towards different types of debt, is starting to perceive and start that separation process, right? This is a huge one. We're going to have a whole day on this because it's something that people completely skip over in their business finances, and it causes so much, so much hecticness, is really understanding the importance of separation of finances when it comes to personal and business and what that can do for you. But starting out when you're looking at your debt and starting to see, oh, these were business expenses, these are business debt, and there are other ways that I can pursue paying them off, rather than, looking at, oh, what is the pay that I have coming into my household from my business, and I then need to figure out how to pay that debt off because I did utilize personal credit cards, is vastly different. So let me know in the comments, like how that lands and if that makes sense, of like the importance of starting to create the separation process and starting to understand like, oh yeah, like credit cards can sometimes be business debt as an entrepreneur. And it's important for me to, take that into consideration as I start to organize my business finances to create a higher level of financial stability, right? And choosing also to get a business loan out that at a fixed rate that allowed her to pay it off over time really neutralized her nervous system around this, right? Because like when you have a credit card and you're seeing that statement come in every month and it's like totally activating for your nervous system, right? And you're just looking at the interest that's growing and you're feeling like you're falling behind, it can be really, really, it can like really activate our trauma responses, right? It can really activate us, going into overproduction in our business. It can activate us into totally freezing out and not showing up at all in our business. It can, cause us to be in a total, just like fight state when it comes to our relationships. It can really activate us in so many different ways. So let me know if you've kind of faced some of those like trauma responses around debt, because I do think it's like really important for us to consider how emotionally activating debt can be. And so that's the very first aspect of like, okay, how do we start to shift our relationship with debt? As we start kind of on the mindset side, we start to see how are we emotionally responding to debt, and how can we develop a better relationship with our debt and drop into gratitude, drop into understanding the separation of our debt, potentially start seeing them as different types of debt because that's what they are, right? And starting to really know that it's okay to have debt and that it is like a tool to be utilized. And we just have to figure out the empowered money manager way to engage with credit and debt and allow it to help us grow our financial stability and security. And so this leads me to, the same going for credit cards. I think that sometimes credit can be perceived as something that's very, very negative, and like that's not what it has to be at all. It can be something that allows us to really enjoy our spending. It's something that, when we start to crack the code on credit cards, it can really be, oh, like I get to use my credit card and I gain all these points and I do pay it off in full each month, but I gain all these points and it pays for, my trip out to California this year. It paid for half my flight to Europe this year. And it allows for us to have all of these amazing experiences, all because we just decided to utilize credit in a really strategic way, but not go into debt over it, right? Or not to, cause a more challenging financial situation for ourselves, right? So I really want to invite you into, thinking about what is your desire around credit, like what it feels juicy and exciting for you to think about of, oh, what are these ways that I could utilize credit cards? Like seeing those people on, Reels or TikToks or YouTube videos and seeing them be able to pay for, full flights or hotel stays or whatever, right? Like when you think about for yourself and like thinking through, oh, what would be the most like pleasurable, exciting way to spend credit card points or money back or miles or whatever it might be, but really lean into like, what are your desires and giving spaciousness to them. And let me know in the comments, right? Like kind of like, what is your secret dream of how you get to spend credit card points or money or whatever it is, right? For me, it was definitely travel. And that's what I've said my cash back always goes towards, right? And I've just set that as a priority for myself. And that's what I utilize my cash back for. I have other clients, we've worked out the strategy of like all the cash back ends up going to holiday shopping because like, they're like, it always comes around. And it's always so overwhelming and frustrating. And it's like, oh, well, like, you're regularly spending on your credit card. You're not, you get stressed out at the holiday season. You're regularly spending on your credit card. You're paying it off. So like, what if we just found the right credit card that gave you the most possible points back or cash back? And like, you then turn that into just like literally your holiday savings account. And that's what it gets utilized for. And so I think that it can be really transformative when we start to allow ourselves the freedom to play in this space of, oh, like what would feel pleasurable and enjoyable and fun, right? It could be you getting your hair and nails done frequently. It could be splurging on like top shelf makeup or face creams, right? Like it's really, what do you desire it to be and how do you want that experience to go? And so I want to really invite you into that, right? Invite you into that reframe and that mindset work of what are these different ways that you can play with your desires around credit and debt and think through the new way of perceiving them. So the next thing that I want to talk about is actual repayment of debt. And before I do, I'm going to check out the comments. Definitely debt activates my trauma responses 100%. I feel all the crappy feelings about it, asking myself, why do I get caught up in the debt crisis cycle and how do I get out of it? Exactly, right? This can be such a challenge. I think that I really want to, highlight this comment because it's so true. And I think that a lot of people think that they're alone in this. They think that like, oh, I'm the only one struggling and facing this. And that's just like not true. You're not. Like so many people are facing the same like challenges around debt because there's so little education around it, right? Like the industry just so intensely encourages people to vilify debt and like not see it as anything good. And just, they just don't teach strategic ways of how to engage with credit cards so that you don't get into debt, right? Instead, it's just like, oh, just go ahead and ignore it and like, spend and like, you don't have to, once the bill comes, that's when you have to pay attention to the balance. And then it's like, oh my gosh, the balance is so much higher than I thought. And, and it's so frustrating because I think that there's so little education around credit card usage and debt and figuring out the sustainable way in which to do it. And so that's why I love the way in which I teach how to do credit card management and like actually working out the financial plan that allows you to really know what you're spending each month on your credit card and just in general, right? And so that brings us into our strategy of like, how do we actually start to handle debt? So the way that we actually start to handle debt is we throw everything the industry tells us out the window and we start to lean into what is the sustainable way in which I can repay this debt and start now, right? The biggest thing is starting now. I cannot tell you the number of times that folks have come to me and they're just like, I don't know where to start. Like, I don't know how to get started on this. And so I've just gone into total freeze mode. And I completely understand that. It makes total sense because there's so much, contradictory information out there. Do you start with the highest interest? Do you start with the highest balance? Do you start with the one that doesn't have interest right now, right? It becomes such an overwhelming space of making decisions and making really big decisions that feel like they have very weighty financial consequences. And so I want to just like validate and let you know that that makes total sense. And it makes complete sense that you are, feeling overwhelmed about where to get started. So number one, you want to start, right? You want to start wherever you are at. So the biggest thing here is actually taking a look at your debt, understanding, when the due dates are, understanding, what the interest is, understanding the balance, understanding how much interest is being gained each month, right? And creating a plan for repayment. Now, there are tons of options out there for repayment, and I have done all of them, right? All of the strategies that I teach when it comes to debt repayment, I have actually done myself. I have done the personal loan that was, over a 5-year time span that would save me a ton of interest long-term and would just lower the monthly payment that I was facing when I had a lot of credit cards. I have done the transferring to an interest-free, like roll over, right? Like where it's like you open a new credit card, there's interest free for X number of months. And so you pay off the debt that you're rolling over from another credit card in the time allotted so that you don't end up paying any interest. I've done that one. I have done the slow and steady method where, you organize the cards into the order that's best for you, whether that be a snowball method, right? Where you start with the lowest balance and work your way up to the highest one. Or, I haven't done the avalanche, which is where you go from the highest interest down, and work your way off that way, right? But like at the slow and steady, those are the two strategies of slow and steady, where you pay one card off, and then like once that one's done, you pay the next one off, and then that one's done, and then the next one. I have done ones where I close the credit card and talk with the credit card company about a repayment plan, and get on one that's sustainable for me. Either way, right? What I'm saying is there are tons of options in front of you when it comes to handling debt, right? And the same goes for, mortgages or auto loans. I've worked with, my clients on talking with the bank about renegotiating to get a lower interest rate, and to get something that was more sustainable for them, and pursuing just like a new loan that's going to be more manageable with a lower interest rate on some of those more like traditional financing options of like an auto loan or a personal loan. I've done the work with my clients of, they're working in nonprofits and they have been there for years and making sure they're filling out the paperwork to get like debt forgiveness for college loans. There's all these ways, right, that you can work to pay off debt. And I feel like it's just about making the decision around what one's right for you. Okay. So it's not about looking at the financial expert and taking their word as gospel and being like, oh, this is the one I have to do. And if I can't do it, then I'm a financial failure. And it's not about being like, oh, well, like this is the only way, right? So I think that a huge like aspect of this, right, is people look to like financial experts, or they read information and they're like, oh, well, if I can't do the avalanche method, then, of attacking the credit card with the highest interest, then I just can't do this. And like, I'm a financial failure, right? Or like, oh, like if I can't get another credit card to roll this over and not pay the interest, then like none of the options work for me. And so what I really want to encourage you to know when it comes to actually paying debt off, right, is that no, that's not true. This is about finding the sustainable repayment plan for you, right, and your nervous system. It's about holding yourself through the challenges of having accumulated debt and then being able to pay it off and figuring out the most strategic way possible for you. And so I want you to really think about, oh, like outside of, oh, I'd get a pay in full client and just be able to wipe out this debt in one go, because I feel like that's what we always fantasize about. And that's what so many folks who come to work with me fantasize about. And for a while, they'll hold on to that as a strategy. But when we actually get down to business, they start to see, oh, wait, like I could start making a strategic plan and getting started now, which is the most important thing that you could do with debt repayment. And then who knows, like, 4 months into your repayment plan, all of a sudden you see a pay in full client rolling in and you were like, oh shit, all I had to do was get started. And then, 3-4 months later, I was going to receive this pay in full client, or I was going to get the raise at work, or I was going to, suddenly sell out my group program. And so when we finally take the pressure off of the money coming in, because we said, like, we actually took the actions to get to know our debt, right? To create a plan that worked for us right now, that we could start, that was not just paying the minimums, but like a plan that was really like, oh, okay, like I'm paying the minimums on these card, and then this card I'm paying more on over the next 6 months, and I'm going to get rid of it, right? Like, I think it's so important for us to understand that when it comes to debt repayment, you need to get started now. This is not something to wait in the future to handle. And so it's about finding the sustainable practice that works for you right now, and then giving yourself permission to be adaptable in the future. So here's where the big hook is, right? This is the thing that makes it all different, is that what I was talking about with the current financial industry being so rigid in its plan, when you choose to buy in to the feminine finance methodology, when you choose to follow the principle of sustainability, you automatically are going to be able to apply adaptability, right? The second pillar, by being able to be like, oh, I'm choosing this sustainable plan, which means as my own financial picture changes, I'm able to then change my debt repayment plan, right? I'm allowed to make edits. I'm allowed to understand that life shifts. I'm allowed to understand that I will make more money as an entrepreneur. I'm allowed to understand that I may get a raise. I may come into some cash and like be delightfully surprised and being able to, pay off debt in a different way, right? But the big thing is you are shifting your relationship with debt, with credit, and starting to understand, oh, how do I start to engage with it differently? And how do I desire to utilize it in the future? Okay, so the big strategies here are really getting to know your debt, right? So if you do have debt, I really, really encourage you to go on a delicious money date with your debt and go ahead and get to know those details and start to understand, oh, what does this strategy look like? What would be a sustainable strategy for me? And of course, like if you want to get into depth of like your current financial picture, I do have availability to work with me, and you can always check that out. Just send me a message. So getting started now, getting to know your debt numbers, and then mindset wise, you're really reframing your debt. You're starting to understand the separate aspects of your debt and your dynamics with those debts, your feelings towards each of those types of debt, and starting to start that separation process of what is business debt, what is personal debt, right? And starting to separate that out to better understand, what debt belongs where as we start to separate finances, right? Because it's so important for us to separate out our personal finances from our business. And if we haven't done that yet, you're definitely going to want to catch I think that's tomorrow or maybe the fourth day. You're going to want to stay tuned for the next 2 days. And so it's so important for us to start to reframe into this gratitude around our debt, starting to understand our emotions, starting to separate things out, and starting to take these action steps of getting to know our debt rather than going into avoidance or freeze. So I'm going to check in with comments. Let me know if you have any questions. Yes, loving adaptability and applying it to finances and debt, that creates better feelings for me for sure. Absolutely. This is such an important aspect of the feminine finance methodology. Adaptability is something that so many folks don't want to talk about in finances. Like, it's kind of like, oh, well, like everything's going to be somehow rigidly the same month to month, and like nothing's ever going to change. And so like you need to create a budget, and that budget's going to be the same every single month. And it's like, actually, you need to create a financial plan. It needs to be adaptable. You need to understand real life is going to happen, and you need to show yourself unconditional love and compassion when that real life does happen, right? Whether your income is going up or going down, whether your expenses are going up or going down, this is real life. This is what's going to happen, right? I mean, look at the economy right now. We're seeing, inflation hitting everyone, and it's suddenly like, oh, why are people struggling? And it's like, well, have we considered that the cost of living is on the rapid rise? And we're talking about, like a package of bacon being almost $10 when it used to not be. So I think that it's very important, for us to start to develop these money shifts in our relationship with our money, and starting to understand, oh, where is our money going? What's happening with it? How do I relate to debt? How do I relate to credit? How can I utilize these tools to actually create greater financial stability for myself and enjoy my spending and celebrate it by having these beautiful credit card rewards and, trusting that things are going to be okay? Because I do think that a huge aspect of examining our relationship with debt, reframing it, and, learning a new way of being with debt and with our money in general really impacts our trust with ourselves, right? And trust in knowing that it'll be okay and that we can handle any financial situation that comes our way. And I think that's one of the things that makes me most happy about the work that I do, is that has been, a common feedback to the way that I teach financial management, is like, it's a really empowering experience. And that's why I so constantly come back to being an empowered money manager, because, it's a sense of, I get to feel like I can handle any financial situation that comes my way. And that makes me so happy, like, I think that it's like so exciting to be a part of someone's journey and helping them start to see that they can handle any financial situation that comes their way, and they can really navigate it from a place of empowerment, from a place of, authenticity, and from a place of just agency. So that's really my goal here from today's workshop. Let me know what was really transformative for you about these perspectives on debt. Let me know what was, what really landed for you. What did you like? What did you not like? Absolutely leave a comment. Definitely give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed this live stream. I really enjoyed sharing these thoughts with you and sharing my perspective on the feminine finance methodology. And I hope you're able to join me for day 3 and 4. And I'm seeing just, yes, aiming for financial confidence. I absolutely love that. Let me know what your desires are when it comes to your relationship with money. And with that, I will see you tomorrow. Bye.